Hey, I'm Zach.
And I'm Jesse.
And you're watching In Depth
on Now You Know.
Sponsored by EcoWare. Help support our channel with new designs every week. We carbon offset the production, shipping, and life cycle of every product. And we plant a tree for every order. See, that says Berlin.
It says Berlin.
Giga Berlin.
Zoom in on that. And we're brought to you by abetterrouteplanner.com. Do you want to go on a long-distance trip in your EV, or maybe just down to the store to grandma's house? Check out A Better Route Planner. They've already surpassed 14.8 million trips planned. So, I don't know. I haven't heard too many problems for 14.8 million trips. So, go check them out.
So, what we're talking about today is GM's EV Day.
Yes, this is the day.
Do you realize those are words I thought would never come out of my mouth?
When we started Tesla Time News, GM had come out with the Bolt, but that was about it.
Right. I mean, they had the Volt.
Right. They had the Volt, and then they came out with the Bolt, and we were excited and a little disappointed.
I want to give you some background. I was always excited about GM. As a kid growing up, when I finally heard about the EV1 that would be coming out, and then when it came out, and then, of course, they crushed it. But then I got excited again when they started talking about the Volt and the Bolt. The Volt was supposed to be this awesome-looking car. I mean, take a look at this. I mean,
wow.
This was touted as going to be like just an amazing-looking car.
Yep. And
it was going to be like their tour de force kind of car.
Yep.
And I was like, yes. And then they basically scaled it back to, well, how about a Chevy Malibu? Would that be good? They just cut corners everywhere they could. Now, it's still a good car. Brent drives one. It's awesome.
Yeah.
It gets you, 40 miles roughly of EV range before the ICE motor kicks in.
Right.
So that's great.
It's a great balance of a plug-in hybrid. Like, there are some plug-in hybrids where it's like, you get 14 miles of electric range, and that's not enough. It was a great car.
And then the Bolt was going to be an all-electric car. And, I mean, it is a good car. There's nothing, I'm not against the car. It's just that GM doesn't really make the car. It's mainly LG that makes the car.
Right. And, again, we're not attacking Bolt owners here.
No.
If this car worked for your budget, and right now it's one of the cheapest electric cars on the market that actually has a fairly approachable range, it could be a good option. It's why whenever someone is approaching us and asking us, like, I want to buy an EV, what should I get? We sit down and we have a conversation. I don't just say the Model 3.
But that's what excites me so much about EV Day is I was like, yes, GM is going to start making some announcements that's going to blow Tesla out of the water. Because keep in mind, GM's a big company. They've got a lot of experience. They got a lot of factories.
And there have already been a lot of little piecemeal announcements here and there. Right. And I was like, oh, good. So finally, I'm ready for the main course.
Now, you probably didn't have time to watch the 2.5 hours of EV Day, which we just did. And I got to say, spoiler alert, it was underwhelming.
Extraordinarily.
So go in with, if you had your hopes up, if you had your popcorn in your hand right now and you're like, okay, this is going to be good. It's not great. So it starts off with CEO Mary Barra, who says that they're taking a holistic approach to EVs. Sounds great. We want to put everyone in an EV and we have what it takes to do it.
Woo!
Yes.
Yes, that is what I like to hear.
All right.
Woo!
So, what are you going to do? 4 new vehicles, the Cadillac Lyriq. So, this is the first we're hearing of this. This is the first Cadillac EV, the Hummer pickup truck, which we've heard about, and 2 new Bolts, she said. I don't know what that means.
Okay,
but she said these will be in customers' hands by 2025 at the very latest. And I was like, whoa, Jesse, wait, I'm sorry. I was busy typing notes.
Yeah.
I'm like, did she say 2025?
Right, because that is in 5 years.
Right. She said they're making an unprecedented investment for an all-electric future. We believe climate change is real. And again, hearing that is yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
That is what I like to hear. Thank you very much. Those are good words.
So she started talking about how the Bolt, it paid off 4 years ago because they had the first long-range EV. And I was like, well, I'm sorry, Jesse. I was busy typing again. Did she say the first long-range EV?
She said the first affordable long-range EV. So
okay, I'll hand that to
there
him.
You go.
I will hand that to you.
Yeah.
Very good, GM.
You weren't paying attention. You were typing.
Exactly. Then they said that they're going to accelerate their investment and they're going to invest $20 billion in electric by 2025. That's $3+ billion a year. That is probably one of the best takeaways that we're going to have from this day, which means that if they're putting their money where their mouth is, that's a pretty good number. $3 billion will buy you a factory at least, and everything that it takes to come out with a new line of cars. So,
which means it could be as much as a factory a year.
Right. which would be great. Then she said another one of these ones, which gave me a double take. She said, we want to have 1 million EVs in our customers' hands every year by the middle of the next decade. And I did my math, and that would be 2035. And she included China in that. Their Chinese manufacturing as well. So that slowed me down too, because I'm like, wait a minute, that's 15 years from now. So then she started talking about their joint venture with LG Chem. So they are going to drive the cost of batteries down below the $100 per kilowatt hour mark. Early, she said. We're going to do that early. She said that there's some new great opportunities by going EV here, some new sources of revenue. For instance, they could license their technology to other companies.
Other car companies who are thinking about making electric vehicles.
Right.
Wow.
That they could do that. Also, they could do rideshare. And she said, we could make our own cells, our own battery cells. And I was like, you could.
Not things that they were going to do.
Right.
Things that they could do. Possibilities in the future.
Right. And again, I just want you to remember as we're doing this, all of this is because of Tesla. They would not be doing this today if Tesla had not forced their hand.
I think actually they should thank Volkswagen, because the licensing tech to others is something that Volkswagen is working on. They're working on the MEB platform, which is a scalable, configurable platform for electric vehicles. It's very similar to what GM was talking about in this presentation. So I think that GM should probably also be thanking Volkswagen for that idea.
Okay. Mary said that 3/4 of Bolt EV buyers are new to GM. Interesting.
That is a very interesting
offer
stat.
an electric car, you'll bring in customers.
Yes.
Then she said we want to triple the number of level 2 charging stations at GM locations in North America later this year. So easy to mishear that and be like, oh, you're going to build charging throughout the US and Canada? No, at their locations for their workers, which is great, by the way. Awesome that your workers will have places to charge. I'm all for that.
Now, their locations, that does include dealerships.
Yep.
Which means that potentially, if you drove a GM vehicle, there is a possibility that you could go to a GM dealership and charge your car there.
Possible, yes.
Possible. The problem with this is that the GM dealer has to be open. The charger has to be open and available and working.
Yep.
And that isn't always the case.
Nope.
As we've seen before, I used to drive a Nissan Leaf. Nissan used to have chargers that were available. Very infrequently were they actually available. Right. And I've heard the same thing from Bolt owners.
So sustainability. She said they're developing new battery chemistries, which will not have cobalt in them and which will not have as much nickel in them. So that's great. But again, keep in mind, that's LG Chem figuring that stuff out.
Right. And that they are developing. Right. They have not developed.
Right.
She also said that they have already 100% recycled all of the batteries that they have produced. And she left it pretty vague. And later on, they kind of were a little bit more specific. It's 100% of the batteries that have been reclaimed under warranty since 2013.
Right. And so the under warranty part is very critical here. That means they have to have admitted that the car had a problem that was under warranty and accepted the car back. If your car was done with its warranty, they do not recycle that battery. So just keep that clear, because that's a very small number of cars. That means you had to have a defective battery within that time period that they agreed was defective, that they took back and then recycled.
Right.
So they said another nice thing. We support a renewable electrical grid.
Right.
Awesome.
I don't know what that means, but
good.
If it comes to something positive, that's a great thing.
So then GM President Mark Royce talked about the 3,000 patents that GM has, the $1.5 billion they've invested this year in electrification, and they talked about their new Ultium modular battery system.
Right, which we are going to be getting to very soon. While President Mark Royce was giving this speech, it was one of the more uninspired speeches that I would, not the text, not what he was reading, but the way he was saying it. Let's just see if we can play just a little clip.
Thank you, Mary, and thanks to all of you for joining us here today. You know, we brought you here to Warren, Michigan, because this has been the home of GM's Technical Center and the heart of American innovation since 1955. Every vehicle we have designed in the last 65 years has come through the building that you're sitting in, our design dome. Across the pond, our R&D facility is busy ushering in the future. General Motors has filed more than 3,000 global patents related to electrification.
Yeah, it almost seemed like we were going back to maybe the 60s or something. Like I couldn't tell what decade we were in. It didn't seem like he was talking about technology.
He was just very unexcited about this. This was just a day at the office that he really wasn't looking that much forward to.
I feel like he got a lot of his speech from a bunch of his helper engineers that he probably said to them, like, tell me some things I can talk about. And one of the things he talked about was that currently they have 555 different internal combustion engine combinations that they can put together to make a particular car. So they can take a V8 engine with a particular powertrain.
No, that they currently are doing.
Right. And they can offer that to their customers.
Right.
And that's a lot of complication that adds to manufacturing. Whereas with EVs, they have 19 different combinations, which makes production so much easier.
Yeah.
So that's a great point, except that's arguing against your own business model.
Right. Then he said that with the experience that they have from the EV1,
and I almost dropped my keyboard. I was like, did he actually mention the EV1?
Right. The EV1, the Volt, and the Bolt, as if it was this lineage, as if it was this continuous, first we started with the EV1, and then we continued to the Volt, which they didn't do. They started with the EV1, and then they took them all back, and they crushed them, and they didn't make an electric car for freaking 20 years.
Right. Then they talked about that they make pouch cell batteries, and that has an advantage over cylindrical batteries, which they never explained later what the advantage was.
Well, the advantage is that you can stack them together, and they're right next to each other, whereas with cylindrical cells,
they don't.
You got to boop, 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 boop. You stack them all together, and then there's a little space in there,
right?
Which, as they talked about before, really gets in the way of the passenger compartment. You don't want your batteries taking up a ton of room in your car, which is a huge problem that all electric cars face, is that there's just all this room that's,
Yeah, can we talk about this for a second?
What?
So they're showing off this Ultium modular battery system, which is just Tesla in 2012.
Well, not even that, because, again, they're using pouch batteries. It's different, but it's not revolutionary. They just put batteries in the floor.
Right, but they talk about it as if they've invented it, as if this whole skateboard design and this modularity is something that we've come up with.
Right.
And it's like, no, you didn't. So why are you even stressing it as if it's not something that the entire industry is now using?
Right, because as we've seen with many different electric cars, not just Tesla, right? Tesla did it first. And then if you look at the Audi e-tron or the Jaguar I-Pace or the Porsche, they all use a skateboard design. So this is not new. They're just putting pouch cells in there that they can stack in different ways.
Then he talked about that 78% of owners charge at home, which is totally true. It's again, it's as if they're talking about stuff that they just found out about.
Right.
And it just it rang really weird to my ears because they made it sound like they have discovered all this information and they're the first to discover it. And it's like, what?
Right. This is pretty well established at this point. And these two, actually, there were three big opening remarks, are just kind of touching on some of the points that they're going to talk about later in their module discussions, because that's cute.
So then they talked about Super Cruise, which is their hands-off driving, and they said that the Bolt will be the first non-Cadillac with Super Cruise, which will be expanded then to 22 other models.
Yep.
So that's great. They'll have autopilot style driving in their other models. Great. Then he said that they were working on EVs at about 20%, and now they're working on them 60%. So 60% of their work is on EVs. I don't know what that means. Is that research and development? That's
the work that's being done on this campus. And it was the campus that they were currently standing on.
That makes more sense.
So this wasn't GM as a whole.
That's
this
just
was
that campus.
that particular campus.
Gotcha. So then they talked about their Ultium modular system, and this was Mike Highfoot. He's the director of IR, and I don't know why the investor relations guy is telling us this, but they've got one cell family, and they said they have deep experience designing cells from the EV1 to the Volt to the Bolt. And then their battery engineer head, Andy Ori, started talking about their new NMCA chemistry, which will have higher nickel, lower cobalt. In fact, he said 70% less. Now, he said 70% less. I don't know what that's compared to. Their existing chemistry?
Yeah, compared to chemistry you currently use.
Okay, which is exactly what Tesla's doing too, but that's great. And then they talked about how they're going to manufacture an LG Chem joint venture in the Midwest, and we'll be building our own cells, they said, using LG Chem's Dreamline 2.0 factory system.
Right.
So I think what that means is if you make a partnership with LG Chem and you say to them, hey, LG Chem, want to build a factory in the Midwest and sell your batteries to us and we'll help pay for the factory? I think LG Chem is like, no brainer, sure.
Right. And this is not unique. Okay, there have been many different battery manufacturing companies, and in many cases, LG Chem itself, getting a deal with a car manufacturer where the car manufacturer basically antes up the money for the factory, pays for the cells, and the battery company is just able to leverage their IP, I guess, to make a whole bunch of money off of them.
Gigafactory 1 has Panasonic doing this with Tesla, so it's nothing new. The cool thing here is that GM said that they're going to build a new plant that's 30 football fields in size that'll have 30 gigawatt hours of capacity. So that's great. They're going to be basically building a gigafactory.
Right.
So again, if you're looking at this from, hey, how is GM doing in the market? They are where Tesla was years and years ago.
The good news is they're moving in the right direction.
Exactly.
And I mean, they are a bigger company, so they do have, a little bit more money kicking around, and plus all those ICE engines that they sell that can help fund this transition, which they should have been doing, I would argue, a while ago, but I'm glad that they're doing it now.
Now, they're really proud of this new innovation they have, which is that they can take the battery cell and take it out of the module of your battery pack and replace it if either it goes bad or if a new technology comes along. That sounds great. My only question is, I don't quite understand how easy it is to get the battery pack off the car and to open it up and to get the modules out.
That's because that's not what they're saying. What they're saying is, with the architecture that they've created, when they come up with the better battery technology on the production line, they just cart in the new battery cells, and the guys who are sticking it in the thing, or the robots or whatever, they're going to load it into the thing, and the computer's going to go, oh, these are XYZ cells. I should treat them as such.
Okay. That's great. If it works out that way, that's awesome.
Yep.
I hope they're right. They did mention that the 1 million mile battery life is within striking distance.
Right.
So that's good. A lot of things they talk about, they haven't accomplished, but they're going to do it soon, just like with the $100 per kilowatt hour battery.
Right.
They said that they set that goal in 2013 and that they haven't gotten there yet, but they're going to do it.
Right. So what it looks like to me is that they're currently trying to squeeze as much as they can out of the existing battery chemistry and manufacturing technology. But there's going to be this big battery chemistry innovation that happens that's going to really drop them below the $100 per kilowatt hour, which sounds great. I'm sure that they're working towards it. It's just Tesla might already be there.
Do you know one of their big innovations, though, that they can already do? They can either stack the cells vertically or horizontally.
Wow.
Huh? Didn't think about that one, did you?
I think I have I shouldn't say it because I might want to patent it, but what if you stack them diagonally? Oh, hey.
Anyway, the idea behind this is that if you stack them horizontally, you can gain a little bit of height to the module if you need it for like extra passenger space.
Right, because that's such a problem with electric cars. Let's really dive into this for a minute. All these electric cars have all these bulky bulges coming into the space, except that's only on certain cars where they were like, well, we can copy an internal combustion engine cars and squeeze some extra batteries in there. Like on my Model 3, there's no transmission tunnel. Right? The back seat, just a flat floor. And in the very rear of my car, there's an under-seat storage that goes pretty much all the way to the bottom of the car.
Exactly.
And you don't have that in a normal car because that's where your mufflers go.
But by talking about this, he did kind of let it slip that the Hummer EV pickup truck is going to have a double stacked battery pack, which should have 24 module packs. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, and overall, they said that they had a 25% weight reduction from Bolt and a 45% connection reduction from Bolt. Now, keep in mind that they also increased the size of the cells by 60%, and they put fewer cells in the car. Right. So that makes sense that you'd have fewer connections. Overall, I'm glad that they're working on batteries. That's good.
But they're talking to GM investors here, and I want you to keep that in mind because most GM investors don't know anything about EVs. And so this was, I guess to kind of let them know the whole basics. And one of the things they said was, we can make a rear-wheel drive car. We can make a front-wheel drive car. We can make an all-wheel drive car.
Right.
As if
as if this was breaking news, as if this had never been done before. They really... And I mean, I guess I get it. It's corporate. It's just so disingenuous to just be like, and guess what else we can do? We could put 2 motors in it. It's like having 2 engines in one car.
Well, speaking of 2 motors, they're going to have 3 motors in the Hummer EV pickup truck.
Yeah.
That'll be about 1,000 horsepower. And I was like, I've heard of doing that before. I don't know where I've heard of it.
But honestly, I'm actually fairly excited about the Hummer. if it turns out to be a decent electric car,
There's another thing I never thought would come out of our lips.
Yeah.
Excited about the Hummer. And then Kelly Heilrich is in charge of their charging infrastructure. She said they have smart partnerships for charging for the best experience humanly possible.
right. And so they have been working on their app, their integrated app. So it's going to be, everything is going to be integrated. It integrates with EVgo, EV Connect, and ChargePoint. And it connects with your car. So as you're driving along, it'll adjust itself in real time to both your driving conditions and whether you have the heat on or not, to tell you whether or not you can make it to your charger, and maybe you need to go to a different one.
That sounded familiar too.
What sounded familiar to it?
The fact that it would help you navigate to a charger, tell you how much charge you'd have when you get there, and tell you whether the charger was available or not.
Yeah.
There's another company that does that.
Is it Audi? No, I mean, this is all fairly new stuff, but I mean, keep in mind,
Okay, but can I go into a finer point here?
Yeah.
If you're driving a Tesla, one really nice thing about it is you can see exactly how many stalls are available coming up at a supercharger, how many people are charging there. And here's something we've experienced on the road. If there's a 4-stall supercharger, there's a good chance that when you get there, they might all be taken.
Right.
And you'll know about that as you pull up. But if you get there and they're taken, the good news is that there's very likely one that's going to be opening up soon because it only takes about 20 minutes to charge.
Right.
If we go to her system with EVgo, EV Connect, and ChargePoint, those are generally slower charging. And so at level 2, those people are probably going to be there for a long time,
Right.
and there's very few stalls. So even though, again, you'll be able to hopefully see them with this app, there's not going to be many options for you.
Right. And superchargers usually have more than 4 stalls. 8 and 6 is usually some of the lowest that you'll see, but there are some 4 and even some 2s out there. But the vast majority of them are between 6 and 12, and there are even some that have much more than that. And the nice part about that is that there's actually some granularity. And so you can say, oh, there's only 3 people charging there now, and there's 10 or 11 available slots. That's wonderful, because that means that I'm definitely going to have a spot when I get there, because it's very unlikely, I'm driving along, there's only a few routes along the supercharger, and I haven't seen like a billion Teslas, so I'm probably going to be able to charge there. Whew. Relief, no worries at all.
What got me, though, is if you say you want to have the best experience humanly possible, then copy Tesla's system, because when you get to a supercharger, there's no fumbling for an app or for a card. You just plug in and you're charging, and it's super fast. And again, she didn't really talk about that. So if you're new to charging, and if you're an investor in GM and you don't know much about EVs, you're just like, oh, well, they got that solved. No, you don't have it solved. You have to do it fast, and you have to do it, as she said, best experience humanly possible.
Right.
And you haven't answered that. That's what makes me so mad.
We have heard in some of the literature that they've come out with sort of piecemeal about some of their newer EVs that they're going to be getting up to about 150 kilowatts of their fast charging systems. And that is great. I would say that is a good
goal.
Good goal to be hitting, because honestly, we know that works.
Right.
150 is pretty stellar in terms of fast charging.
Right. It's kind of like the 300-mile range. Once you hit that mark, you're doing pretty well.
Right. And so I'm looking forward to a lot of these cars that are probably going to have that. The problem is that right now, all the Bolts that are on the road, if they have fast charging, it's only 50 kilowatts. Right. And that really limits what you can do in that car.
Right.
In terms of long distance travel. In terms of, home commuting, absolutely fine. And in terms of I will stop at some wonderful supermarket that has a fast charger and I'll get 50 kilowatts while I go shop. That's great. You just earned yourself, 40,
here's the thing.
50 miles.
After hearing all these people, she was the only person that I heard say that she drove an EV. And I know that for a fact, because I know the way they talked about the EVs, that they don't experience them. Until you own a product, how can you make that product? If I'm going to make a phone for you, but I use a dial phone, you're going to be like, I don't trust you to make my smartphone.
Right.
You need to make and experience that product every day. And so she brought up another interesting point, which is that you're 6 times more likely to consider an EV for your next vehicle if you have charging at work. And I thought that's a really good point.
It is a really, really good point. And so that is one of the things that I think all companies should be thinking about, is getting EV charging at work, because it's going to really accelerate this EV adoption curve.
Right.
Because it really takes a lot of the hassle out of charging.
So now we got to the point where the questions came from the major banks, the JP Morgans and the Citibanks. And this is interesting because this is just like an earnings call with Elon. And funny thing, when you get the earnings call with Elon, you get banks that ask some pretty hard questions and they ask them pretty like, I want an answer. Here you got these very hands-off, like softball questions.
I would say that some of them were fairly hardballish,
Yes, but
they
they were
accepted absolute
no answers.
non-answers whatsoever.
So, question from JP Morgan was, well, you're out in front of most in terms of autonomous. And I stopped there and I was like, again, no one would hand Elon this.
Right.
And they're not well out in front in terms of autonomous.
No. They bought Cruise, and that's about it. They are working on this Origin thing. We haven't seen it work in the real world at all so far.
How can you say you're well out in front of other manufacturers in terms of autonomous without mentioning the word Tesla?
I think that maybe if you want to be invited back, you don't mention that. It's like a sore subject.
Well, that's what I'm saying about the, soft questions. And so then, Barrett answered that, I guess, and she said something that just caught me. She said, our auto dealer network is a huge asset. And I was like, that is not a huge asset to you. That is holding you back.
Right.
And is going to hold you back.
Right.
But, I mean, I don't know if she just said that to be nice to her dealers.
You can't, it's a very tricky subject. You have these people who you have to string along to sell your ICE cars right now. And in the future, if we're being generous here, that they're thinking of switching to a fully AV model, autonomous vehicle model, where it's all going to be ride sharing, or you're going to be selling it to individuals who are going to be doing mostly ride sharing, most likely. It's not real need for the dealership model because you can literally just drive the cars straight out of the factory and onto the roads and they can start earning money immediately. So what do you have to say to your dealers? You can't say, oh yeah, we're thinking of getting rid of them. They're really not an asset to us. They're a really big hindrance to the adoption of EVs because EVs don't require a lot of maintenance, and that's how most of the dealers make a lot of their money, and we don't see that as a business model moving forward. What if she said that for a minute? Imagine if she said that.
I would be excited. If she
I know that you would be excited, but I'm saying their dealership network would be very, very upset.
Sure.
And they do have some clout.
This goes back to the problem that they have, that they are trapped. And they're trapped by their dealers. They can't change the system without completely overhauling everything. And they can't do that now because they aren't making EVs now in any great numbers. So, yeah, they're totally stuck. I agree. She didn't really have an answer she could give there.
Right.
The next question was, can you charge a premium for your electric vehicles? And the president said a bunch of stuff about resetting our brands and a bunch of words that meant nothing. So I don't know what the answer was.
Yeah, there was a lot of just jargon and slogans and words. I would say words is basically the best word for it. It didn't convey anything. It didn't answer the question. It was just a lot of jumbly gobbledygook.
But if you're an analyst, why not hold their feet to the fire? Why not just say, you didn't answer my question?
There weren't a lot of questions.
No.
It's not like they were lined up. There were quite a few seconds there where they were just standing there waiting for someone to ask a question. So if I were the analyst, maybe I don't have the microphone, but I would start to cause a fuss. I'd be like, excuse me, Mary, you didn't answer my question. I get that maybe you wouldn't be invited back, but what is the point of holding an investor conference if you're not going to answer any of the investors' questions?
Yeah, there was a question about trying to vertically integrate. They said, you're insourcing your powertrain. Are you trying to take back from suppliers? And they said basically something very telling right here. They said, we will know the value chain, meaning they don't know now what it is because they haven't built enough of these cars yet.
Right.
And they haven't started working with LG Chem. So they have no idea where the costs and the expenses are in their value chain because they don't do most of the building now of their EVs, and this is brand new territory for them. This is Tesla back 8 years ago or more.
Yeah.
I'm just being honest.
Right.
So if you're an investor and you're reading between the lines and you're hearing here, be very afraid.
So then there was this question, which honestly I thought was a pretty good question. They were asked, do you see Cadillac's future as being EV, not ICE cars?
Mark said, not that far in the future. That is the strategy for Cadillac, to be a pure premium luxury car. And then he started talking about every 6 months there'll be a new Cadillac and we'll have new seats and new screens. But he didn't really answer the question. All we did get out of him was that yeah, eventually they'll make more and more EVs, but it's not going to be all EV for quite some time.
No, I mean, his answer is basically no.
Right.
That Cadillac was not going to be a purely EV brand.
He seemed to be admitting that Cadillac had been kind of botched as a premium brand, and I believe it's true. I mean, I drove a Cadillac a couple decades ago, and I was like, "This is a Cadillac."
That was a couple decades ago.
They kind of sold off their brand, I think, which is what a lot of car companies are doing. If you look at Mercedes, they're trying to get you into a sub $40,000 Mercedes now. They're doing that by basically taking this brand that's up here and being like, "Do you want this?"
Which is really funny because Tesla's selling a $35,000 Model 3.
Tesla's doing the opposite. When people hear the word Tesla, they go, "How did you afford that car?" And you have to like really convince them, no, this doesn't cost the same as the Model X and S.
Didn't cost that much. They're like, you're driving an $80,000 car. Wow, look at you. And I'm like, it was not that expensive. And we know that it's true on a broad scale because we get comments from people who are uninformed. And they're like, yeah, but you can't afford an $80,000 car. It's like, you can't even buy a Model 3 for $80,000. Right, like, exactly. A fully kitted out Model 3 costs $70-ish.
And that's a performance track mode.
Right. Exactly. I mean, that's with crazy, crazy specs.
So then there was a question about the cost parity between EVs and ICE. And they were asking, like, when is it going to be that an EV has the same cost parity? And they said, will it come around 2025? Mm-hmm. And then if so, what percentage of your consumers prefer EVs to ICE?
Right. And this is where just the best. They said that their customers were agnostic to whether they wanted to buy ICE or EV. Basically, if you could give them a roughly similar car, meaning range and price,
and variety
and variety of, of course, body styles and everything, that the customers wouldn't, I don't know. Should we get the ICE version? Should we get the EV version? And that I know they had to say. That's another one of those things where they had to lie, because if they didn't lie, it would just highlight how in trouble they were.
Why don't they say the truth, which is that consumers right now are uninformed, just like they were uninformed about cars at the turn of the century when they owned horses. It's not that the cars are bad. It's that no one knows about them.
Well, and that once people actually understand all of this information, understand that if the cars cost the same and they can do just about the same, the EV is going to be better on a number of fronts in terms of maintenance cost, in terms of power cost. Those two factors alone make the EVs way more valuable, and that is why we see people switching from much less expensive cars, used cars, up to Model 3s and Bolts and other EVs that cost significantly more than what they paid for their previous car.
Now, Mary Barra had a couple comments here that really kind of shocked me. First of all, she said that the coasts are not well represented by GM. So basically, I guess...
She said the coast.
Oh, no. Then later on, she said the coasts.
Oh, interesting.
So basically, she's admitting that the two coasts they're not selling well on the coasts. They've got the middle of the country, I guess, locked down, near Detroit, but not the coast. So then with the question about, about cost parity and so forth, she said, I haven't done the math. And I'm like, isn't your job as CEO to either to have done it yourself or to have one of your minions do the math?
Right.
You're supposed to lead the company. And without doing some math, how are you supposed to be able to tell how to spend your money? So you just basically decided we're going to spend $20 billion, but I haven't done the math on what that's going to do for us. I just want to tell you, if you're a GM investor, be so scared right now.
Oh, my God.
I was so bearish on GM going into this EV day, but I was hopeful, right?
I was extraordinarily hopeful.
I heard some good words.
Oh, there were plenty of good words. I am glad that the numbers in terms of investment, it seems like is about as much as they are going to be able to afford. I still don't think it's enough, but it's really... I understand that it's probably as best as they can do.
So there's a question here about ICE versus EV returns. And basically, if you read between the lines, they admitted that they're not at parity right now, and that they're going to basically ride the cost curve down as batteries get cheaper till that amazing day when they'll finally be profitable. Mm-hmm. They don't know when that day is. They have some charts that they showed during this, which is like with some very rough arrows pointing down.
With no numbers anywhere, right.
But they didn't give a date, and that's really scary. If you listen to Elon, his dates may be off by a year or two, but he always gives you a date. Here, they have no dates.
Right.
Also, what I really took away from this is that so many of the questions they answered when they were like, we're going to tell you about EV Day, were the wrong questions. It was good to hear some questions at the end, which were at least aimed at some of the things we need to hear about. For instance, one of the questions was, how do you optimize the battery cell? GM thinks that they can change out the cell in the pack as the cell price drops. They said that 80 to 90% of the cost is in the cell. But when they kept talking about how they're going to optimize it, they alluded back to the fact that LG Chem is their partner. And then they basically admitted that LG Chem is teaching us, and we are finding our way. And we are securing contracts to get better supply chain. So basically, all these words were, we are doing this. Like, we're just starting to do this.
Right.
We haven't actually done it.
And you might be saying, okay, but at least they're doing it. Sure, but they're doing it through LG Chem. And LG Chem is a company that can work with pretty much any other company. They haven't signed any kind of exclusive contract. Sure, they probably won't be producing cells for other companies in the plant that they're going to be making in the Midwest. But as the price of cells drops, which is being led by LG Chem in this scenario, it's going to drop for all companies. So there is no competitive advantage for GM in that case, because any company that wants to get in on a battery that costs less than $100 per kilowatt hour now can. So they're not saying like, we have some great technology that we can't really share. We might have some battery day where we're going to tell you all about the technology that we have and how that's a advantage over all of our competition. They don't say that because they can't say that because they haven't done that work.
How about this really important question? Could your customers share their cars with a ride-sharing network?
So if you have any understanding of the Tesla network, he basically just said, hey, can your cars do the same thing that Tesla cars are going to be able to do?
And she heard ride sharing and she picked up on that and was like, oh, Maven, we have a ride sharing network and we've even put the Bolt on it. But there was no answer when in regards to an autonomous ride sharing network, which let's just stop here for a second. If you don't know this already from watching our channel and from wrapping your head around this, when cars go autonomous, and they will, it's not a question of will they, it's just a question of when. When they go autonomous, that changes everything. That means that you don't want to own a car anymore. Most of us will be like, great, don't need to own that.
Right. And if you don't believe us, we made an entire series. So go challenge your view. If you're like, oh, I think that I will always want to own a car. Go check out our Autonomous Driving Future series, challenge your views, because we're definitely going to be bringing up some points that you have not considered before about what an autonomous driving future is going to look like.
So if you're an investor in GM right now and you're watching this EV day and you're like, oh, there's a lot of good words they said. I'm pretty excited that they're talking about climate change and all this. That's great. But when the CEO of the company does not start talking about what's coming around the bend, which is an autonomous driving network, or about the fact that they've got a dealer network that they've got to ditch, you've got to be afraid.
Right.
Because without a plan in place, either it's a secret plan and they don't want to tell you, or they have no plan. And if she said things like, I haven't done the math, I think that lets you know that they have no idea. All they're trying to do right now is make it through today.
Right. And honestly, their numbers aren't that exciting. I mean, yes, the investment numbers are, but the idea that they're going to be selling 1 million EVs a year by the year 2035 in 15 years is laughable, because just last year, Tesla sold 500,000 electric cars, and they're opening new factories all around the world.
So I've been asked this before. We were asked this at the conference in Austin. At the time, I didn't feel comfortable just saying a number. We were asked basically, so you say all these companies are going to go out of business. Why don't you give us a number? And the reason I didn't want to give a number is, first of all, I don't know. Second of all, if I give you a number and it's years from now, neither of us is going to be proven right or wrong for years from now. But here it goes, because after watching this today, I feel pretty confident. I've been thinking about it for a while. I think in 8 years, GM will either be bankrupt or they'll be different than they are today. They'll have to be bought out by someone else to stay alive.
Or there'll be some kind of bailout, some
Right.
kind of thing. And
I don't think there'll be a bailout. I think they'll be so small by that point that you won't need to bail them out. I think they'll maybe, merge with another company. But I think 8 years from today is roughly the time when they're not going to be able to make it anymore. They have enough, I think, factories and assets to kind of ride out for a little while, and they're going in the right direction.
Right.
But they're way too late to the game, and they don't see the future coming.
Right.
This is really exemplified by this last question, which was asked, what's the best way to measure electric efficiency? And they asked this of the head of their EV program, Ken Morris. So you would think, okay, Ken, you know all about EVs. That's what your job is. And he basically walked his way around the question and said that he would call it dollars per mile. And then he proceeded to say something that also shocked me. He was like, well, see that Hummer behind me? That has, higher rolling resistance than that car over there. And I'm like, And he said something about it being not as swift or slick or something. And I'm just like, so you don't really know much about electric efficiency. And he said, we're doing everything we know how, but I'm not going to give you an actual cost per mile.
So
what?
So first of all, he could have just said, oh, you know what a great measurement would be miles per kilowatt hour. It's just like miles per gallon, but it's with kilowatt hours. That could have, that would have been one thing. And then he could have said, or you could do it the other way, which is watt hours per mile, which can be confusing, but it's easier because you have a bigger number.
But do you know why I didn't want to? Because every EV is more efficient than their ICE cars, and they're making way more ICE cars. And so they don't want to tell you that their ICE cars are expensive and their EVs are cheaper to run. They want to live in this wonderful world, make-believe world, where they're like, let's just call all of them equal.
And they're all... our customers should be agnostic.
Right.
They should, whether you want to buy a Chevy Malibu or a Volt, which they don't even sell anymore. I don't even know why I'm saying it. It doesn't matter whichever one you want. And it really is not the case. And yeah, it's sad that he thinks that, a Hummer has a higher rolling resistance than another car. That would, it does, but maybe mention the aero efficiency. Right. Say, that Hummer behind me, that giant, we didn't get to see it. They didn't show it on the webcast, so you had no idea what it looked like.
You had to be an analyst or a big investor to see
it.
That.
I'm imagining that it is big and that it is blocky. So it would have a higher drag coefficient, and it would have a larger frontal area, so it would therefore have a lot more loss due to aerodynamic drag.
You do realize why this EV day came about. It's because Tesla's stock price went through the roof, and GM investors were like,
Why are you giving us all these piecemeal little things? Tesla's going to have a battery day soon, and they're going to tell us all about their new battery technology and stuff. What are you doing, Mary Barra?
And their modules, and they're talking about, she even said at the beginning, like, there's going to be a lot of information today. And there was even a half-hour break in between, I guess, to go, rest your brain. There was no information. There was nothing that we don't already know. And
there were some points where a guy would just kind of tell us a bunch of different processes and ideas that you can do with batteries.
Right.
He was just like, and you could also do supernucleation, which is, here is the dictionary definition that I got from a textbook.
Right.
Here is another, and I'm not really even over-exaggerating how he talked. It was really... poorly done too.
It was.
I was expecting slick.
It was a waste of time.
I really had high hopes.
Yeah.
And they were really dashed.
Yeah. And I'm not saying this because I want it to be this.
Right.
I really wanted them to come out and wow me, and so that we would have another really great competitor and a great source of electric cars, because that's what I ultimately want.
I'm kind of pissed for all the people who work for GM, because
your leadership is letting you down.
Right.
Your leadership is going to drive your company into the ground, and you're going to have to go work for another company.
Right. You're going to lose your job at some point, and I don't want that for people. That's not something that I love having happen, is having a disruptive technology come in that makes the world honestly a better place, and then all of these other companies not doing anything about it, and then hundreds and thousands of people losing their job. I don't like that.
No.
And this is why I'm so mad. This is why I'm mad at GM. It's not that I think that people who buy GM products, Chevy Bolts, are the worst people on earth. I don't think that at all.
So I wanted to see a graph where they were showing that over the next 5 years, we're going to decline the number of ICE cars we make to zero. So here's how many we make today. We're going to make zero in 5 years. And then this is the opposite graph of, this is the number of EVs we make today, very small. And in 5 years, that's all we're going to make.
Right.
If they had said that...
Right.
I would have been like, great, that's a great goal. Instead, they did not give us a timeline. Well, the timeline she did give us was 2035. So,
then that was just for 1 million EVs.
Right.
Which is sad.
Well, that shows you their thinking. They think that this is a 15-year timeline or a 20-year timeline.
50-year timeline.
Right.
It's pathetic.
Yeah.
And if this is the best they can do, they are in severe trouble, because the Model Y isn't even out yet. The Cybertruck isn't even out yet. Even if you only take away 20% of Silverado sales, you've just decimated their brand.
Yes.
When that day comes, it's going to be a day of reckoning for GM, and I don't think that this Hummer pickup truck is going to work.
The one thing that Mary Barra said that I totally agree with, she said, this is a historic day for GM. And it is. We're going to go back and rewind to this day and go, that was the day where the plug was pulled.
Yeah, that was a waste of time. So sorry that we really put all our eggs in this GM basket.
I really
this
thought
week.
it was going to be an exciting day.
Yeah, we
You know, the most
cleared our
exciting-
whole schedule.
The most exciting thing we heard is the name of the new Cadillac.
The
That gives you an idea of how these companies work. They put all their marketing effort into like the name. She was like, "You're going to get to hear the name of the new car."
We didn't get to see it.
Nope.
It's the Cadillac Lyric.
Great.
Rolls right off the tongue. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of In Depth. We hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to hit the like button. That kind of like shares this with a random stranger on the internet, but they don't know that you sent them.
And they don't come knocking.
It's just the way the YouTube algorithm works. It helps us out a lot. Also, subscribe if you haven't. Share it with your mom, and we'll talk to you later. Now you know.